Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm 𝗤𝗏𝗃𝗃, licensed agent with Second City Real Estate. With me as always is Mark Ainley, founder and owner of 𝗣𝗏𝗃𝗃 Realty. Mark, what's up over at 𝗣𝗏𝗃𝗃 Realty?
Well, you know, it's funny. Every Thursday we send our clients an email, just 5 or 6 bullet points of kind of what's going on with it in the Chicago real estate or in our company or things we're changing. But I send a video, and every week I start, welcome to our weekly, I channel you every single week when I send that email to all of our GC clients. But yeah, we're at GC. We are looking to, we're looking for a property manager still. So if you know anybody out there that is either looking to start as an assistant property manager and get trained up to become a property manager, we have those positions available. We have the property management position available to anyone that's got experience in scattered site property management is what we really look for. And then, we're looking for a north side leasing agent to come on board. So if anyone knows anybody or anyone's interested, please reach out to me.
Good stuff.
What you got? I know you're working on something more fun than hiring people. You got your ADU project you're working on over there. Where's that at?
This is in Lakeview. So we got one that we put under contract across the street from another one that we have, one of our prized possessions. But what's cool about this one, it's a Greystone picture 4 units. So 3 units above grade plus a garden. It's a legal 3. It's zoned R5. So by right, we can make the basement a legalized 4th unit. And it's in the ADU zone. I don't have to use my ADU bullet on that garden, so I can still build a coach house. So we're buying this thing, we're taking it from a 3 unit to a 5 unit, legally.
That's I have to tell you, man, that is my favorite building in the entire city. Like, that was the first building I ever bought in Chicago, and it had a coach and it had the basement, and to make it, so you got the shortcut here. For me to get the proper zoning, I had to buy the lot next door. I had to put a new water service. I had to do all this crazy stuff. But if you're in that zone, then you'll have to, a lot more shortcuts than I did. But that is my favorite, that 3-story with a basement, and that's my favorite to have a Greystone.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. One thing, we have the zoning cheat sheet too. So I guess, everyone's talking about deals are tight, and they absolutely are. But, another way, like, can you legally manufacture a couple extra units where you're in a high fast area, so that additional rent more than justifies the cost of doing the project.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing too, just not to take this too long, but it's beneficial for us to go from 2 to 4 to a 5 unit here, just for valuation purposes when we go to refi. Like in this, and that's not always the case, but in this case, like, cap rates are so compressed there, and like having the nicest 4 unit like almost hurts you, right? We almost ran into that in our last one. Like, we have a same situation where we couldn't do the coach house, and we got the comps, but we were concerned about it going in. Where now it's purely off the NOI, right? Cap rates can move on you a little bit, but we just have more control over that valuation on the back end.
You're officially a commercial property.
Yeah, there you go. Got to pay for the dumpster.
But sometimes the city forgets. Hopefully no one's listening, but sometimes they forget on those ones that you customize yourself. And they,
I'm not getting rid of the cans yet.
Don't voluntarily walk over to streets and sands and give them the garbage cans back.
So what's our housing provider tip of the week?
All right, so a lot of people, some of our clients included, have received these erroneous tax exemption letters where the county is calling you out for filing a homeowner's exemption when you're not living there. Now, sometimes this is more times than not, this is a mistake. A lot of our clients bought property a few years ago, and it already had a homestead exemption on there, and they never canceled it, and they've been paying taxes, but now the county's coming back and collecting. And the tip here is, they're going back 4 or 5 years on some of these. So if some of our clients get $4,000 or $5,000 bills for the difference of having that homeowner exemption or not, plus they're putting some interest on there, plus they're putting penalties. And that letter you get, you have 2 options. You can pay it, or you can contest it. And similar to your property taxes, there's attorneys out there that you could use to contest it, where they'll take a share of that savings, or you can do it on your own. But I would definitely advise you seek legal advice before you go do it on your own. So you're getting, it's a very ugly letter you get from the county. It bases across the top, erroneous homestead exemption tax bill payment due, or something like that. And they threaten to lien your property and all that. So if you get that, talk to your attorney. If you want to reach out to myself, I'll happy to refer you to somebody. And it's not the end of the world, but you got to do something about it.
Good stuff. We're talking about zoning and legal stuff here. So luckily we have a cool topic to bring us up. So, Mark, I think these are our best shows when it's a topic that we are, probably not as well versed in. For me, I don't know much about student housing at all. So I'm super excited for this one. So today's guest, very interesting background. He's currently a tremendous broker and investor, but before that, he was a litigation attorney. And reading from the website, which gave me a good chuckle, he got his law degree from the Harvard of the Midwest, also known as Southern Illinois. So how about them Salukis? He's currently the VP over at Triton Realty Group. This is going to be on the investor side, but for those who don't know Triton and you're looking for commercial multifamily brokers, just absolutely great guys to work with. Our guest today, and Matt and James, the whole team, they're a bunch of hustlers. They go and find off-market deals, so we'll link to them in the show notes. But yeah, we're going to talk about student housing across all the different universities and campuses in the city, which is going to be a good one here. So without further ado, Harrison Cohen, welcome to the show. Harrison, it's been a while. How are you, man?
Thank you for the introduction. I'm doing excellent, man. Excited to be a part of the show. Long-time listener and ready to dig in.
Well, you think of student housing, the first thought is like frat house, and you think of like maybe some campus in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of apartments. But today's is very local, and we're going to talk about specific universities. So I'm really excited about this.
Oh yeah, this is going to be a good one. So first off, how did you guys land on student housing, right? Was that a conscious decision? Did you end up just buying something and saying, well, this is the route to go? Like, let's talk about getting started there.
We got to go back almost about 20 years to get to the point where we're at now. Matt Fritschel was my business partner in Triton and the main investor with myself on all our deals. We went to Illinois State University together, and we lived in one of those frat houses you're talking about, Mark. Animal house style. Matt and I lived side by side. Coincidentally, he had just got a referral from a buddy of his to become a leasing agent for a big time. It was a portfolio they had just bought down there, and it was about 400 total beds. And we got involved together because he took the job and he needed a partner. And that ended up being me. And this is about 2005 or so, call it. And at the time they bought an asset down there, they were at 30% occupancy. Matt and I had one old Star Tech flip phone and our tenacity, and we ended up taking 97%.
There you go.
That was our first kind of cut the teeth with student housing, and that's what we were, just young college guys. Fast forward to today, like you had mentioned, Triton, mostly north side. That's how we do all of our business in terms of brokerage. But in terms of investor, we started hunting a little bit further south. That way there would be no conflict with our current clients, and we'll open us up to another area of the city that we thought was a little bit untapped. It started off with me just more like I do every time, cold calls, hunting. And I called up an owner. He kind of gave me the skinny out of the building, and I went into Matt's office. I said, yeah, I think this guy's right. Really? Who says that? That was Kevin. We ended up buying that building, and that was the first one we got. And towards the end of 2017, is that that's a 17. That's how we got in long for.
Very good. All right. So real quick for listeners who haven't been with us since the beginning, Matt was who Harrison's referenced a few times. Episode 22. They're in the heart of the pandemic. Been a while.
Yeah.
All right. So, you guys buy this building, and we'll talk about some of the nuances of different neighborhoods, but what are some things you learned off the bat that how student housing is different from, call it, workforce housing or, quote unquote, normal rents? Like, what are some of the procedures, some things that you had to put in place immediately where it's like, all right, we need to be aware of X, Y, Z?
Well, if you think about University of Chicago specifically, I think this last stat I read, it's like 86% of the student population is coming from out of state. So most of the people that are going to school there, their mom or their dad or, a rich relative is co-signing their apartment. Because obviously they don't have much income as a student, like most. So, one thing that we implemented right away is understanding that a student values, one, their address in reference to campus, and two, security. Mom, dad, or anybody that cares about their child when they're sending them off to school wants to know they're safe. So we had to improve basically our systems to install Butterfly MX systems on all our buildings. We offer also as a program too, we'll heighten our security if necessary. recent building we bought, we were in negotiations with U of C specifically to try and install lease kiosks right in front of our building, but whatever reason of missing it. So, trying to improve security measures, make sure that a student realizes that they're in a safe spot. And also from a management perspective, your tenant that's a student is obviously going to be different than somebody that's a resident there and is, working a full-time job. Their schedule is different. So, everything from leasing season down to how you actually manage the building in terms of the nitty-gritty's got a little bit of a nuance compared to your standard, call it the market res.
Okay. And we'll dive more into that, but sticking around Hyde Park, we talked about the address specifically for University of Chicago. How far does student housing go, right? Can I be a mile away, right? Like where would you draw the line of like, is it 2 blocks, 4 blocks, 8 blocks? What are your parameters for, okay, this is a good student housing bet?
That's a good question. Most students are asleep until close to 11, depending on their schedule. So in their mind, they're thinking, how late can I sleep and then get up and still want, right? No matter your business, whether you're buying a building and you're looking for a market tenant or you're looking for a student, I think it's always important to put yourself in the mindset of your customer. In that case, it's our resident, right? So address is important. To answer your question, Hyde Park extends north to 51st. I think that's about your best cutoff. The university has slowly been moving more south past the Midway. We bought a building, 43 units over at 61st and Ingleside, throw a rock to the law school from there. So we're going to be getting 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝘁𝗃𝗏 grad students already moving in there. And I'd say your north-south is 51st all the way down to, call it 63rd. Far west is Washington Park. What's the east side of Washington?
Yeah, we've had, my business partner, Cliff, went to University of Chicago 20 years ago or so now, but the university gives you strict guidelines of where you should not cross in different parts of the day or night and where you should live for safety reasons. So that it's probably something that you guys learned early on from what they're selling. But yeah, we've had students, we have a bunch of condos and a couple of flats in between that 61st and 63rd corridor that when on the 62nd block, we weren't getting student housing 10 years ago. Now we are getting grad school kids and stuff like that. So that I just want to confirm that movement south there in Hyde Park has been big. And I think the further east you go, it might even be going creeping a little further south. So
cool. And then what do you see for rents? Like let's stick with the University of Chicago. Like let's say, again, you can't say, oh, this is student housing, this is not. But when you're in an area around a university, can you quantify what that premium is compared to being 4 blocks away, right? When you might not get the students. Like how much do they drive up potential rent?
Well, I think it's interesting because you have to think to yourself when you're kind of forecasting rents. A lot of times people want to just think about, what am I renting my unit at, right? In reality, most students are thinking about, what are me and my roommate, my friend, going to be renting our unit? My housing stock down there is as big as a 4-bed and then as small as a 2-bed. I don't have many small unit sizes. So usually in my mind, when I'm forecasting rents, I'm thinking about it on a 4-bed basis. Although I'm renting the unit on one lease with multiple signers and 𝗤𝗎𝗄𝗎𝗄𝗎𝗓𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 anywhere between, call it 800 on the low end up to 1,200 per bed. Could be, I think, a decent range depending on the quality condition the unit of address. The other point I think is important to make is, you see in call it the Logans of the world and some of these nice neighborhoods that, you have people that come in and they improve the buildings. My goal in all my buildings is not to over, is most students, they've got, a few plates. They're not there a lot. They're going to beat the unit up a little bit more than, somebody that's living there is full time in their home, right? So, not spending so much in terms of an actual construction budget to still get the same amount of rent on a per foot basis. So, yeah, I see on a per foot called anywhere $2 a foot all the way up to $2.50 is where I'd pencil it out at, depending on your address and Hyde Park and condition.
So the first building you guys bought, I think you said 17 units. What was that 100% students at the time? Was there some mix? talk about like someone that wants to like build, like like convert something. Like how difficult is that, or is you have to do all or nothing? Give us some of that.
That building was a full reposition done. And the reason being is it was a long-time owner. Her husband, and her had bought the building, and they were elderly, and they really stopped caring for the building. It was 20% occupied when we bought it. Very, very rare. The woman was an attorney herself, and I called her at her office. And I said, "Hey, Mary, I see you're an attorney. I see you represent this client. I'm a lawyer myself, and I buy apartments." And that's how we started that deal to begin with. And when we bought it, that was a full gut. We spent more money there than we have in terms of construction budget on some of our other assets. But the other ones we've bought, like 𝗏𝗏 on 54th and University, that building, we haven't done much in terms of construction on the above grade units. We're doing some work in the basement, so we were able to add 2 units there. So, kind of depends on the asset, obviously, and it depends on the condition of units. But our goal always is to try to get students, if possible, just because that's kind of our business model of what's worked for us.
So if you take that, you got rehab that, and then you go to put it on the market, like, is the marketing a different? Like, you go to studenthousing.com versus the MLS, like, to talk to me about like how you're going to attract the right people. Even though you're in the right place, you can still get someone that works down the street.
Well, that's a great question, Mark. And, when it gets back to like most things, timing, you have to understand, locally, as I'm sure most listeners here, you guys know, leasing season starts between the next date and the next, right? But the leasing season for students really depends on the student calendar. All of our leases are 12 months, standard Chicago car leases. With that said, the law school doesn't start until September. So most people right now aren't going to be looking for a unit. Maybe in a couple months, we're going to hit that brand new open wave of marketing. So how do we market? One, we know when the proper time is to market. 2, we use AppFolio for our management software, which is integrated with a lot of apartments.com, a lot of the big ticket, rental companies that most students look at. We've looked into partnering with a company that does brochures that are given to all the students when they move in. In the midst of it, I've reached out and trying to build a relationship with the university myself. So they realize, hey, we're housing providers and want to take care of our buildings, our students. And it's really just getting the information in the hands. And most of the students are technologically advanced. They're using Zillow, apartments.com, University.4Red University is another. Specifically within the university, I post my units on Chicagoland, which is the university's specific campus website. And we've also been fortunate to have students that are graduating and then they pass down me. They say, hey, I've got this friend. They're only a junior. They love the address. They want to move in. So we've been able to avoid a lot of leasing commissions and fees just by taking care of our current residents and then referring us new ones to move in at the start of the next.
How common knowledge is the school schedule? Can anyone, if it's whether it's Loyola or 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃, like, can someone go online pretty easily and figure out those dates and kind of back into season?
Oh yeah, just a simple Google search. You can get on the University of Chicago website, and it'll tell you specifically when they're quarterly, but it'll tell you when their calendar is of when enrollment begins, commencement, and all that good stuff. So I'm a big fan of Google, so I do most of my investigation work.
All right. So, complicated question here. Like, how, put it up, you get your beautiful rehab, you put it up there, and a family of 4 wants to move in. Like, how do you work around that part, I guess, or how do you gear it only towards students, or can you label it student housing?
No, our description describes it as perfect for students and faculty. But obviously, like any housing provider, we definitely will obviously listen to CHA and try to, accept any Section 8 related to that, assuming they meet our other requirements. Typically, we're looking for a 700 plus credit score, 3 times income, all that good stuff. So we do have some Section 8 tenants, and we don't steer them away. But historically, our business model, the way that we've been able to grow, has been focused solely on students.
Gotcha.
All right, so let's talk about, this is all good stuff, and we're talking about the University of Chicago, but it sounds like you guys are across a lot of different universities, right? So we have UIC, DePaul, Loyola, etc. I guess let's jump to UIC because it's geographically the closest from U of C. What are some nuances over there, right? Like talk to us through like, hey, I like that area and I want to do student housing. What's different than compared to being around some of the other universities?
Well, my perspective on the other universities is I got to put more of my brokerage hat on just because we don't own a ton of product by U of C specifically, or UIC, excuse me. But, we just did an analysis for a good client. Our office sold them the building. We did a full reposition on it. And I just pulled the data before I got here. He, believe it or not, is getting 3.65 a foot on a turnkey, beautiful. I mean, awesome product there. But you can walk to campus in half a second from where he's at. So,
and I'm assuming this is, washer, dryer, and unit. Like this is like, you do this like you're doing, Lincoln Park, Lakeview type of.
Exactly. This is like a soup to nuts, A to Z, ripped to the brick walls. And I mean, it might be the highest price per foot I'd see in that neighborhood. So, that specific example, I think, involves his location and his ability to walk to Taylor as a resident as well. But I think the difference, I would say, if you're comparing, call it UIC and Hyde Park of University of Chicago is, as we all know, I think for the most part, I think your listeners know, UIC is historically been more of a commuter type of school. You get a good amount of people that do want to live in the city. But in terms of a captive audience of 80% of their 17,000 student population moving to Chicago, they need housing in Hyde Park. Whereas other people at UIC, there are student rentals and they are doing well, but I don't think your pool of potential students is as necessarily as captive, if that makes sense.
So in your researching online, are you able to find that type of data? Like how many, because some of these schools have their own housing, right? And they have their own buildings. Are you able to easily investigate those things online of how much they have provided there versus demand and all that stuff? Are you able to dig deep?
Oh yeah, Mark. So, specifically going back to Hyde Park, call it 2016, they ended up selling about 300 and something units to a group out in New York.
Yeah.
And then shortly thereafter, they sold 3 other resident halls. So University of Chicago has been moving away from their actual housing component, but for some new developments that they're doing on campus, ground up. UIC has their own housing stock as well. Not a ton, mostly private landlords. Loyola as well has their own. So what I like to do is, one, it's no different than researching any market, right? Like how many people total could potentially be looking at my unit. At U of C, first-year students have to live in the dorms. So that already wipes out a portion of my ability to find somebody to rent the unit, right? Similar to Loyola, similar to UIC, they, most of these schools for your first year want you to, stay in their dorms if they have it. So, I think it's dialing in the numbers to understand how many people can use my service, which is a beautiful, apartment. And from there, kind of backing into, what I think the rents are of that stuff, depending on the specific market.
Tom touched on this a little, talking about larger units and so forth. Is there any amenities or anything that you don't have to have? Is bedroom size as big of a deal because they're students? Like, is there anything that you could have less of compared to the market when it comes to student housing?
Oh, I could dial deeper into the Chicago specific, just because we're pretty unique. If we were talking about my old stopping ground, Wilmington Normal, or the harbor of the Midwest, as I like to call it, Southern Illinois University, you're on an island over there, so to speak. And what do I mean by that? What you see housing stock-wise for students are garden-style complexes that are going to have those type of amenities. Or if you're smart enough to get into a great school like U of F, all right, you're going to have a brand new building built by made in CAF, or these Class A type luxury products. My product is geared towards somebody that wants a nice place, quiet place to study where they're safe, and they can walk to campus in a short amount of time. So to answer your question, I think that Chicago itself is a unique structure within the student housing kind of arm of real estate because it's in a city intertwined within some campuses. So you get a blend of that type of stuff versus your Wilmington Normal, which is the whole city revolves around that specific thing. unless you work at State Farm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. What do you see, like, let's look out 10 years in the future, right? Each neighborhood is going to be different. But do you see that, our university is going to try to gobble up more of these areas? Like, is it almost like being like Wrigley? Hey, the Cubs might buy me one day, right? Like,
excellent question. Last year, a long time overhead, I think it was a 6-flat, right on that kind of border of where the campus starts, and he'd held on for a long time. They wrote him a check for, I think it was $6.5 million. I'll double check to just make sure my data is right, but it was just stupid enough. And it was somewhat Ricketts-esque, so to speak, right? Why did they do it? Because they're trying to build something over there. I don't think University of Chicago is going anywhere. Been around since 1890, one of the premier institutions in the world. There's more Nobel Prize winners there per square foot than anywhere else. It's insane. I, of course, was not smart enough to get in it. But I was smart enough to know that that's where I want to buy. And I'm planning on being there for a very long time. So do I think the university can try to do what we're doing? Sure. I don't think they have the knowledge to want to do it. Is being a housing provider and running an educational institution are two different fruits and two different baskets. So, God bless. If they want to buy my stuff, we'll know where to find it.
yeah, put it out there. So, all right, let's talk a little about DePaul now, right? Like, where would you consider student housing there? Because that's a big campus, and then part of everything. Where would you ideally draw boundaries where I can still get students here, right? Like, am I Fullerton and Clark? Am I still getting people?
I think so. Fullerton and Clark, it's tough because DePaul's so sporadic. It's such a big location. It's not as kind of dialed in as I'd say, obviously, UC or even 𝗦𝘁 or Loyola. So, you're kind of like a spider with a bunch of tentacles out there with DePaul. It's tough for me to kind of draw a radius around there. Specifically clients that I know that old product over there have had some success running to students. Others have said, I don't want to deal with the intensive nature of renting to a student, and I'd rather just rent to a market tenant. So I think DePaul, I don't know if I'd say you get above for it being a student versus a market tenant. Depending on what your business model you got to do with right for you as a housing provider. But I think that the cast of the net is a lot wider in a Lincoln Park, Lakeview area surrounding DePaul than it is even Iowa.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. They're just one of the pools that you can be fishing in, right? The demand is going to be there regardless. If DePaul closed tomorrow, the demand is still going to be there for you.
I feel we have on the faculty side, so for properties we manage, we have a lot more in Lincoln Park. So it's funny, we have some of these older buildings, maybe not as updated, maybe a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, $1,300-$1,400, and we get kids in that 5-6 blocks away, and then you have these $4,000 or $5,000 newer condos that the faculty is renting. So we get a lot. We actually have a handful of faculty there compared to any of these other universities on these single unit ones we manage.
Nice.
Yeah, faculty game sounds good. It sounds less intensive. So what about Loyola? Let's talk about Loyola a little bit.
Loyola is just a beautiful campus in itself. You're right off the lake. I'm a member of the Rogers Park Builders Group. We have meetings there, and I'm off going up to Loyola. We've done quite a bit of business on the broker side up there. From an investment standpoint, I think it's an excellent area to take a look at. Is it similar in my mind to the Lincoln Park DePaul aspect, where you kind of get to talk two different waters? If you want to get a student, you can get a student. If you're, within universities, walking distance, I believe, or even a little outside of it. Or you also get to touch the normal market tenant as well. So you kind of open yourself up to two buckets of somebody that could come and rent your unit hopefully for a nice price. In terms of price per foot, there was a new construction deal that sold last year. They were upwards about $2.50 a foot for their units. That was on Loyola Avenue. I sold a building that had about, I'd say, 2.5 foot also as well in terms of rents, big units, nice renovation from a good client of mine. So yeah, I love the area, and I think it's a great area if you're looking to invest as well, just because you're close to the lake and you try to get it in a spring price. Further the cap rate, it's going to be less than you're looking to buy falling at Lincoln Park all types.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So All right, so we've talked a little bit about leasing, but I want to walk through the process like kind of granular here. So, school starts, let's say in August, like they're on semester, the typical, 2 semesters, they're not tries, So when do you start? What is the process like? Like, are the parents who co-sign, are you pulling applications on them? Like, just walk me through from the time you decide to list something to the time someone has moved in. And how is it different from what I might be used to, not being familiar with?
I'll walk you through our process and we can kind of see maybe what's different in comparison to how you guys run your building from a management standpoint. Every one of our buildings, if there's, mostly students like we're talking about, they're going to use the standard car lease. And with the car lease, I also include an addendum that has some just normal rules and regulations. All my residents get a resident handbook as well when they move in. Kind of outlines everything. It says, hey, here's what to do with X. Here's your contact person. So from a leasing standpoint, when do we start? We're actually, believe it or not, have fully leased one of our buildings already for next year. And how did we do it? I offer all of my residents a $500 referral bonus if they refer somebody that's outside of the building, they sign it. So that's actually been a unique way for me to generate leads from residents that I know, like, and I trust a referral. So we put it up on all the normal platforms, including, like I had mentioned before, Chicagoland. We get an application in. They're going to have a guarantor on it because 9 times out of 10, most of the students are not going to meet our income requirements or potentially crime. So what do? It's a 4-bed. We request they have 4 guarantors. They also apply all through AppFolio. Part of the issue is
so you got 8 people, like in AppFolio, you're seeing 8 applications there, but it's all sourced under one.
Best case scenario, yes, 8. Sometimes it's hard to afford everybody to get an application filled out. So we have a policy within our company, after the app is sent out and we grant them at least they have 48 hours to execute it, or we continue showing the property. And a lot of times I feel like that gives somebody a push to say, hey, Dad, I really want to live here. Can you click the button and get the pay stub? So once all the information's in, we review it. From me being an attorney, I can never have enough documentation. And the more documentation and the more ability we have from an applicant, the better it is to make an educated decision from a risk standpoint. Last thing we want to do is get somebody in our unit and, God forbid, have to fill. So we go really, really full throttle with the microscope on the front end, just to put ourselves in a position where we're not going through that type of eviction process, as we all know.
Yeah. Okay. And then talk through hey, you got 4 roommates, 2 of them are graduating, 2's not. Like, talk me through how you handle the renewals where it's oh, I'd like to stay, but we have a new friend to come in. I got a feeling there's a lot of crisscrossing there.
For Camdy, it happened at one of our buildings this year. What we tell them is we don't rent any of the units by the bed. So, part of the issue that we could have in terms of student housing is if you're trying to match people, so to speak. Let's say I rented a bed to a female student, and now I've already wiped out in males because this female is we want to live with them, right? We're not playing matchmaker, guess who. What we're doing is we're saying, hey, we like you, we would love to have you for your senior year, but we'll find 2 friends. And ideally, they typically do. And if not, then we'll say, well, we have this other building and it's a 2-bed. Why don't you guys move there? Rent's pretty similar. So we're not in the business of trying to find residents for, current residents. We're in the business of being upfront, giving as much notice as possible, knowing what our students are doing. And as soon as we know what they're doing, coming up with a plan of action to make sure we hit our timelines before they think.
In preparing for this episode, I realized we have a lot more of these random student housing throughout the Chicago area. We have stuff on 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃 College and a whole bunch of stuff in the medical district, and then the medical school over there in Forest Park. And yeah, I was talking with our team on this, and the one complaint about this is parents being involved. Most of these kids are still not even doing things for themselves. And the kids, they're in their 3rd year of college or 4th year of college, and the parents are calling up saying, hey, he paid too much. He paid for the other roommates. Can we get a credit back for this? And how are you setting expectations? Again, like Tom said, you got 8 people, 8 applications, eight. Those people don't always know each other, so you really deal with a lot. What are some expectations you're setting to kind of make your back end easier?
Well, I'll give you a prime example just in terms of parents and their involvement. We had somebody that was going to apply, and they looked us up, and they called Matt, my business partner. They called his cell phone. It was a dad. And he left a message, and guess what Matt did? Called him back. And we asked what the dad said. He said, hey, you called me back. That was the first thing I wanted to know. Somebody actually going to respond. God forbid something happens like that. And, what do? We do our business just like we are as human beings. We're straight up, tell people what we're going to do, we do. And in terms of how we set ourselves up, we are very clear with what the rules and regulations are. Like I said, as soon as somebody moves in, we give them a resident handbook that I crafted, like a little 4-page guide. Says, oh, I want to break my lease. What can I do? Or, hey, listen, my toilet's out. How do I fix this? What do I do? All of our stuff has been enhanced mostly through technology. So automatically, God forbid, if somebody's got an issue, if we can't solve it, we're communicating. Say, hey, we understand there's an issue. Let's get this figured out. 9 times out of 10, you're right, it's going to be a mom or dad. Most of the people are high net worth individuals that are paying the bill for 𝗣𝗶𝗃. It's about 62 fees a year to go to that school just to get your name with a badge to enter the classroom. So it's expensive. And, when you are a resident and trying to do well in school, you don't want to have to worry about those types of things. And, 9 times out of 10, you're younger and you haven't really lived that. That's part of being in college, it's kind of growing up. And, we're just responsive and we care about our buildings. So they're long-term assets for us. So we try to do the right thing. And sometimes it's not so common.
Well, going back to the parents real quick. So like in AppFolio, do they have access? Like, can they put a work order in from the tenant side? Are they, being able to shoot a text to whoever's responding from your end? Like, how are you giving them the same privileges as you are the people living in the space?
It usually, yes. And the reason being is that it's easier to get a response back. Our biggest fear is if somebody's paying the bill and there's an issue, we want to be able to respond. So sometimes it's just through AppFolio. Then if, God forbid, the situation is a little bit more serious, then it's our head property manager talking with ownership, which is usually just Matt, myself, about the situation and how should we respond and handle it. We try to respond as quick as possible. And if there's an issue, we got to get on it because it's our building and, we don't want there to be a big problem that turns into something. So to answer your question, yes, moms and dads do have access to our AppFolio setup. They can access and pay the rent online through that as well. And they can respond also to, maintenance requests that come in. And it's important for them because it gets back to, going to bed at night knowing that, their daughter or their son's in good shape and they don't have to worry.
Yep.
As far as the leasing goes, or the Chicago ordinance, 𝗟𝗟𝗖𝗄, is there anything different when it comes to student housing? Are you allowed to collect security deposits? Are you, how are you guys handling that to offset? Are you just down for stuff?
No, I mean, the landlord tenant in Chicago still applies the same, obviously, to student housing as it would if we were just renting into the normal market resident. For us, we don't deviate from it. As most of your listeners know, it's a very one-sided law. And we just have to understand the ins and outs of it to protect ourselves and to also do the right thing for our residents. So to answer your question, using the proper documentation is the number one helpful thing. Understanding how to respond to a certain situation and putting something in writing is important. From being an attorney, the biggest issue in terms of anything related to document litigation is documentation. For us, we document what we say and we do what we say, and then we're not in the problem. It's pretty easy to sue people these days. There's a lawyer for every case. And, understanding how to protect yourself as a housing provider in Chicago is something that's very beneficial. And if not, you're going to learn probably by paying some money. And that's probably not the best way to learn, but some people have to learn.
Talk to us about a hard lesson you've learned around the whole student housing thing. We always like to kind of hear the bad days too. Give us up on it.
Hard lesson, worst turnover. Let's hear something bad.
Yeah.
I think one hard lesson would be, taking an owner's word and not verifying it as fully. For example, we bought a building and he said that the top resident, his aunt was moving in and they were on a lease, they could be out by close. So sure enough, we didn't do a final walkthrough and, it took a little bit longer in this situation to get them out. Thankfully we didn't have to evict them, but, not verifying what you trust somebody's going to stay is a lesson that, could cause some issues. It did in my situation, but could cause some issues, obviously, for anybody that's looking to purchase an asset, whether it's student housing, a true market rate deal.
What's some advice that someone was buying a condo in Tri-Taylor or 60% Kimbark or in Lincoln Park? Like, what's some advice if someone was looking to go towards this that you give them if they're trying to go down?
Condo specifically, Mark? Is that what you're saying? A condo?
Yeah, man, let's just say condo then if there's something relevant to that.
Yeah, and I think they should first read their bylaws and see if they could buy something that has the ability for them to rent out. That's step one. Step two, assuming they can, I would prepare themselves to understand what the leasing season is for that specific market. So I get online, understand when the school year starts, and make sure if I was doing a renovation, I'm positioning myself to have my unit rent ready so I could touch the top of the market as opposed to being stuck. Another lesson would be that building that, we had a gut, the first one. That construction project took longer than expected, like most construction projects. Cost more money than we expected, like most construction projects. But what we didn't expect was we would be in a spot where we would, lose out a tier from leasing season, right? So not understanding fully that leasing season in this scenario, no different than the person looking to buy that condo in one of these called student housing specific areas, you got to get your ducks straight and be prepared. And for us, we were prepared, but there were things that came our way that forced us to be flexible. So you got to be flexible and pivot. And that situation, we end up renting some of the units to, non-students, some of which they're still in the building. And, just trying to take things a day at a time and come up with a good game.
Are you getting co-signers on pretty much 100% of the student housing piece? Is that usually they don't have the income revenue?
Okay. Yes.
Yep. Hey, so someone's listening to this episode, they're interested in, hey, I want to start looking at some of these places where, my tenant base is probably going to be student housing. What are some underwriting nuances, right? Like, do you up your maintenance cost? Do you up that turnover cost? Is insurance more because they know you're by university and you're going to have a bunch of 25-year-olds there? Like, what are some maybe gotchas that they had to plug into the spreadsheet?
Yeah, I think, turn costs could be a little more costly just because typically your students are a little bit harder on the rental, right? So I would definitely kind of improve that cost. I would also, from an expense perspective, the other thing too, from a management perspective, this goes both ways. I mean, I don't know if you're managing it, you're going to have a little bit more of your time into this than if you're managing just your standard, normal rental. So whether that's third-party management, maybe their rate's going to be more on a percentage basis, given the fact that this is a more management-intensive asset. Or if you're signing up to do this to yourself, knowing that I'm going to have to, dedicate probably more time than I would if I was just buying a free flat. So, time, value, money, I don't think it goes into the spreadsheet in terms of your time, right? But knowing that, in terms of the numbers, I mean, they're all going to be pretty much the same. If you're doing a construction budget, you're going to have to pencil it out. How far you want to take it is going to be up to you. I would advise, depending on where you're at, to not overprove it just because you don't know if you're going to achieve those runs. And most students, depending on the location, are just looking for your address to get as close as they can to college of business or whatever, university building they need.
One more question before we wrap, but anything on the management or, you said you're using AppFolio. Is AppFolio anything special about them as far as tracking the data that someone should know about? Is there anything on the management side that you should be aware of? Any because as students, we walk the property twice a month. Is there any sort of different steps you have along managing properties on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, we used to use Buildium and got a little bit bigger for Buildium, and they weren't as responsive. I felt like sometimes we'd have an issue with the program, and so we switched to AppFolio. I like AppFolio more. I find it's more kind of user-friendly, intuitive. Also, as we're continuing to grow, it kind of fits in our model to allow us to continue to ramp up and grow with that actual property management software. From a management standpoint, I guess enough other underwriting expense, I like to use pest control often. Most buildings, we like to go in there and spray at least quarterly. It also is a good excuse to see what's going on in our units. So I'd like to do a little bit higher kind of pest control expense just for my own underwriting. In terms of AppFolio, the other reason I like it is it can integrate with all the butterfly systems. I like the butterfly system because most students are getting packages, whether they're sent from mom or dad, or they're ordering things off of Amazon, and knowing they could get in and call if the cell phone and buzz right into the resident. Packages are still going to get lost, but I think bare minimum now you're in a spot where you at least have a little bit more security. All of our buildings have cameras on them, selfishly just because I like to see what's going on. But also, God forbid, if there's an issue, we can figure out what the problem was and have video evidence need be for 𝗵𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗃 police or whatever ward we're in related to that district. So, I think management-wise, I think the nuances, there's a few of them, but it's very, very closely related to normal apartment rentals. It's the stepsister, so to speak.
Cool. One more, because you mentioned the butterfly system. On the actual units, are you still doing, keys, or are you doing the keypads? Just given the higher number.
If you go direct to butterfly, what we like to do is we hardwire our entry for a front gate, assuming we have a gate there, or for the front door. So they buzz in, and then you have a normal key to get into your unit. Reason being is just easier to replace the keys than it is for key fobs. You could go full throttle and get a key fob system from Butterfly. There's another company called Latch. I like the Butterfly system just because it's pretty easy to use. Most of our residents haven't had many issues with it. And I think keys in general, the easier they are to find and just replace, that's probably better than the actual kind of bad system like whole.
Yep. Mark, let's get Butterfly to sponsor us. Some good words?
Yeah, look at that, for sure.
Cool. Guys, you could be a caterpillar like me and turn into a butterfly.
There you go.
All right, Harrison, you ready to wrap?
Let's do this.
Let's wrap it up.
All right, what's been your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do all this for student housing while so many others wish they could?
Persistence. Persistence is the key, man. Anybody could do almost anything if they get a recipe, but knowing is not doing. And doing requires persistence. So my persistence is my competitive.
I used the word tenacity earlier. I love that word.
Yeah, it's a good one. What is one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in Chicago?
I'd say know what you want. Yeah, how do you know what you want? Researching. I think you got to get your ducks in a row. You got to get, I'm sure people on all their episodes have set a team in place. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of information out there. I think weeding through and knowing what's the right fit for what you want to do is the best way to provide a path to success. So finding the right people to help and knowing what you want makes your ability to be more precise better.
Awesome. What do you do for fun?
My wife and I like to travel. I speak fluent Spanish, so yo puedo hablar contigo. Y me gusta viajar a muchos diferentes países, usualmente en la sur parte de americanos. So I like to travel. I like to go to different spots. Usually we go to like somewhere in South America. Other than that, golf, terrible. I like to say I'm sponsored by Callaway. That's always a joke. I joke with my buddies, hey guys, careful of the drone. We watch, usually get a terrible shot from me. Other than that, just hanging and trying new food in Chicago. Plenty good things to eat.
Well, what's a good book, podcast, or self-development activity that you'd recommend to our listeners?
I'm a big reader, always been. I also love listening to this podcast, so highly recommend it. If you listen to it now, you probably are a long-time listener, maybe like myself. So definitely straight up Chicago, #1. I like to listen when I'm in the gym in the morning, so I stay tuned. But outside of you guys, I read a book fairly recently. It was called Crushing It in Apartments and Commercial Real Estate. Brian Murray's the guy's name. I don't remember when it was published, but I think he did something with Bigger Pockets, Brandon Turner as well. That's an interesting read. Talks about like over financing, how this guy got started in the business with very little money. Fortunately for me, I didn't have a rich uncle or anything like that, so it's just been little old me and my best friend trying to build this from nothing. So that's what I like, that type of grit, and that's Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss. I'm sure somebody that's listening read that one. You want to get in that FBI mentality. That's a good one.
Oh, good stuff. And just love the title, Crushing It. Right? Like it's right there. I'm in, 100% in.
Oh man, who doesn't want to crush it?
We made all of our people that handle the rent collections listen to Never Split the Difference, because it's good, like, on that psyche is to trying to collect rent, like for these people that are just continually lie or BS or try to push off or try to, love it.
So smart, Mark. I mean, hopefully they're crushing it on that collection aspect.
Nice bring back.
Yeah.
You know what I did there? But people still have a face for radio, man. Obviously they're wrong.
All right. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network that you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
I'd say Chris Tate-Com, excellent attorney, awesome real estate lawyer, been doing it for a long time. His perspective is unique because he owns real estate as well, so he gets it. And I'd highly recommend Chris if someone's looking to have somebody help them on a transaction from a legal standpoint. He knows what he's doing, and he's a guy I know, like, and trust. Chris Tate-Com.
Good stuff. Well, Harrison, thank you so much. You provide a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
Yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, pretty easy to find. My cell phone's right on our website. Give me a call, shoot me a text. In terms of value, if anybody knows anybody looking to sell at Hyde Park, call me up. I will pay a nice fee, and we will own another building. So they can own.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, we got a Chicago fact.
All right. Today's Chicago Fact brought to you by 𝗏𝗏 Financial, and it is Brent Hopkins that's playing for it. He bought a sweatshirt just last week. So, Brent, thank you very much for going to the Straight Up Chicago merch store. And if myself or Harrison get this question right, then we'll send you a $50 gift card brought to you by 𝗏𝗏 Financial.
There you go. So it was alluded to about just all the Nobel Prize winners, I should say, and just all the great people that come through the University of Chicago. Which one of these that I'm about to name did not attend the University of Chicago? And here are your options. So, Mark, you get first shot at this.
Isaiah Thomas. It was provided. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, here's the four who didn't, and you tell me which one did not go. The co-founder of Second City, a former minister of New Zealand, the writer of 𝗏𝗃𝗃 𝗏𝗃𝗃, the bassist from Styx. 3 of those went to the University of Chicago. Which one did not?
Wow.
I got your head all over the place on this one.
It's a co-founder of Second City, so I'm assuming they went. Give me right down over fast again.
Co-founder of Second City, a former minister of New Zealand, the writer of 𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗃 𝗏𝗃𝗃, or the bassist from Styx.
Bassist from Styx, I'll go with.
All right, Harrison, what do you want to go with?
Man, I want to phone a friend. I'm going to go with New Zealand Prime Minister, just to even the odds here.
Yeah, we're going to double down for your guy. You didn't need to, though. Mark nailed it. The bassist from Styx.
Yes. So my thought process is like, that one's too obvious. We've talked about Styx being from Roselle on this episode, on the show before, and it's like, so all right, awesome. Well, Brett, man, you got it. You got the $50 gift card. We'll send that out to you. Brought to you by Renova Financial and listeners. Another awesome show. Thank you, Harrison, for coming on. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, Harrison said earlier he recommended this podcast, and you're listening to it already. But what we need from you is to refer us out to your real estate friends. We all have these little real estate pocket communities that we're in, whether it be on a Facebook group or in some sort of one-on-one peer networking group or mentor mentee stuff. Refer us out. That's what helps us grow. It's you guys referring us. So we appreciate that. And thank you, Harrison, for coming on. Look forward to seeing you in person at the next party. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, we will see you next week.
Thanks all.